Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Psicologyst, where intuition meets investigations. Whenever I work on a missing persons case, I document my psychic impressions exactly as I receive them. Afterwards, I use AI technology to compare those impressions with publicly available information and geographic features associated with the person's last known location. In this episode, we examine the disappearance of 20-year-old Derek Samuel from East Point, Georgia. It is a story that begins at a Target store, moves through weeks of searching, and ends with a heartbreaking discovery in a wooded ravine less than 2 miles away. But even now, one question remains. How did Derek end up there? Let's begin. Who was Derek Samuel? Derek Samuel was 20 years old. Family members described Derek as outgoing, funny, ambitious, and deeply connected to the people he loved. His mother said he was always smiling, always joking, and always trying to make others laugh. Derek loved gaming and spending time with friends. He dreamed of one day creating his own clothing brand. According to those who knew him best, he was not the type of person to simply walk away from his life without explanation, especially not without contacting his family, especially not his twin sister. On April 29, 2026, Derek was last seen at the Target store in Camp Creek Marketplace in East Point, Georgia. Surveillance cameras later captured him leaving the store and walking towards North Commerce Drive and Redwine Road. According to public reports, nothing observed on the surveillance footage immediately indicated an emergency or suggested that anything was wrong. To those reviewing the footage, Derek appeared to be walking normally as he left the area, and then Derek disappeared. In late April and continuing into May, East Point police conducted door-to-door canvasses at apartment complexes near Camp Creek, searched wooded areas near Redwine Road, reviewed surveillance footage, and followed numerous leads. As the search intensified throughout May, the reward fund grew from $5,000 to $15,000. Public figures, including actor and singer Tyrese Gibson and actor and musician Gary Dudon, helped bring additional attention to Derek's case. On May 14, 2026, while Derek was missing, I documented a series of psychic impressions regarding the case. My intuitive impressions are presented exactly as they were documented on that day. Afterwards, I used AI technology to compare the impressions against Derek's last known location, and a complete summary was prepared. That same day, my impressions and the summary was submitted to an agency connected to the investigation and to a representative involved in the case. At the time the information was submitted, Derek had not been found, no recovery location had been announced, no one publicly knew where he was. May 16, 2026, East Point police searched wooded areas near Redwine Road using K9 units. According to later reports, the terrain was extremely dense with overgrowth, making search efforts difficult. After covering approximately 4 miles with police dogs, the search was suspended without locating Derek. On May 22, 2026, investigators searched near Aqua Waters Quarry in Lithonia after receiving a tip regarding Derek's disappearance. Late May of 2026, investigators conducted additional searches at a lake in Lithonia and areas near Redwine Road. Police later confirmed these locations had been searched before Derek was found. Then, on May 31st, 2026, the case took a heartbreaking turn. According to online articles, it was cell phone data that led police to the wooded area behind the reserve at Redwine Apartments near Redwine Road and Commerce Drive in East Point. A volunteer team from Georgia Emergency Search and Rescue arrived to assist in the search for Derek. After reviewing maps, search records, and previous search efforts, the team focused on a dense and difficult wooded area with narrow trails behind the reserved at Redwine Apartments that they believed had not been thoroughly searched. Before entering the field, Derek's family, volunteers, and search and rescue personnel gathered together in prayer, hoping for answers after more than a month of uncertainty. According to search team members, they began searching around 10 o'clock that morning. Just 4 hours later, at approximately 2 p.m., they made a devastating discovery. Human remains were located in the wooden ravine. In the days that followed, East Point police announced that strongly believed the remains belonged to Derek Samuel based on clothing and other evidence recovered at the scene. June 3, 2026, during a press conference, East Point police stated that investigators did not currently suspect foul play in Derek's death. Derek's family, however, continued to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding what happened to him. For Derek's family, the discovery brought an end of weeks of uncertainty, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with grief and unanswered questions. Several of my impressions centered on the type of environment where Derek would ultimately be located. I documented trees, wooded, natural barriers. I also recorded references to brush, thick vegetation, weeds with green stems and tiny yellow flowers, depression in land, drop, slightly downward sloped land. When Derek was eventually found, authorities located him in a heavily wooded ravine behind the reserve at Redwine Apartments. Search reports described dense vegetation and difficult terrain consistent with the impressions of wooded surroundings, natural barriers, thick brush, and a noticeable drop in elevation. I also documented drainage, small pond, creekside. The Redwine Road corridor contains drainage systems, retention areas, stormwater channels, and ravine features that appeared consistent with those impressions. Taken together, these impressions seem to reflect the physical characteristics of the area where Derek was ultimately recovered. Another theme involved with the location itself and its proximity to where Derek disappeared. I documented doesn't feel like a foreign location or remote place. Within a few miles, 1.7 miles, 17 minutes. Derek was ultimately found less than 2 miles from the Target store where he was last seen, within the same Camp Creek and Redwine corridor. I also wrote down the times of 5:18, 6:20, 7:12, 7:18, 9:20. These felt like sequence markers, phases of movement, or escalating timeline. Combined with everything, it suggests a progression, not a single moment. I also recorded residential area, homes, apartments. The recovery location was situated directly behind an occupied apartment complex. Additionally, I documented transition area. The recovery site sat between commercial development, residential housing, and wooded terrain, creating exactly the type of transitional environment suggested in my impressions. Several psychic impressions appeared to relate to Derek's movement after leaving Target. I documented north directly. Authorities later stated Derek was observed walking north after leaving the store. I also recorded no walkway, walking near side of road. Portions of the Redwine Road corridor contain limited pedestrian infrastructure, making roadside travel necessary in some areas. Additional impressions included backtracked, dead end, trees, brush, and side road, secondary access. According to AI, the area behind the apartment complex contains wooded cut-throughs, service roads, and isolated pockets of terrain separated from the primary commercial corridor, showed similarities to the impression of secondary access points in dead-end environments. I also recorded hidden yet nearby. One of the strongest themes involved a location that was concealed despite being close to people. I also documented easy, overlooked a location, not covered up, out in the open. People around him, but not intervene. Although Derek was located near apartments, roads, restaurants, and daily traffic, the area remained undiscovered for weeks despite extensive search efforts. The recovery location was not wilderness. Instead, it was hidden in plain sight, a place close to everyday activity but difficult to observe from surrounding public areas. Several impressions appeared connecting to Camp Creek Commercial District itself. I wrote down restaurants all in a row. The Camp Creek corridor contains a concentrated cluster of restaurants and businesses near the area where Derek disappeared. I also documented cameras, surveillance. The Target store, Camp Creek Marketplace, and surrounding commercial district contain extensive surveillance systems. Finally, I recorded construction, bulldozer, work crews. This impressions may relate more broadly to developed commercial corridor rather than the discovery site itself. The Camp Creek and Redwine corridor continued to experience commercial development, roadway improvements, and ongoing construction activity according to the AI analysis. Viewed collectively, these impressions appear consistent with the commercial environment surrounding Derek's last known location and the area where he was ultimately found. One impression repeated strongly throughout the session. Everything that happened felt as though it was already on people's lips. Conversations were occurring, suspicions existed, and pieces of the story were known, yet no one seemed willing to move forward with what they knew. I also sensed a young man who was questioning his purpose, friendships, career, and a direction in life. It felt like he was experiencing a period of reflection and important decision-making, but with a profound sense of running out of time. Near the end of the session of looking into this case, I repeatedly saw what appeared to be a graduation photograph. Later, after submitting my impressions and the summary, I discovered an image of Derek wearing a graduation gown. The feeling attached to it was one of unfinished plans, unrealized dreams, and a future that would never fully unfold. The only photo I had seen of Derek online before I submitted my impressions and summary was the flyer image where he appeared to be wearing a black hoodie. Later, I came across a separate photo of him wearing a red and white graduation gown. When viewed individually, any one of these impressions could be dismissed as coincidence, but viewed collectively, a pattern begins to emerge. When compared afterwards to publicly reported information, several impressions appeared consistent with a location that was near apartments, near restaurants, near surveillance cameras, near traffic, drainage corridors, wooded area, and within a few miles of Target. Not remote, but easy to overlook. At the bottom of the AI-generated summary I submitted on May 14th, one sentence appeared. Behind or just beyond the commercial strip, Target area, within 1 to 2 miles, in a drainage wooded edge zone near residential housing, likely accessed by a side road or dead-end path, not far from restaurants and traffic. So now let's do a brief recap of the timeline. On April 29, 2026, Derek was last seen leaving the Target store at Camp Creek Marketplace in East Point, Georgia. On May 14th, while Derek remained missing, I documented a series of psychic impressions regarding the case. Later that same day, an AI-assisted summary connecting those impressions to the area surrounding Derek's last known location was prepared and submitted to an agency connected to the investigation and to a representative involved in the case. On May 16th, East Point police searched wooded areas near Redwine Road. The dense terrain and heavy vegetation made the search difficult, and Derek was not located. On May 31st, search teams returned to the area and located Derek in a wooded ravine behind the reserve at Redwine Apartments. Whether these observations represent coincidence, intuition, pattern recognition, or something beyond our current understanding is for each viewer to decide. What cannot be disputed is the sequence of events and the timeline itself. This episode is not intended to prove anything. Rather, it documents a timeline, my psychic impressions, an AI-generated geographic analysis, and public events that unfolded afterwards. In closing, Derek Samuel was more than a missing persons case. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a young man with dreams that mattered. Whatever answers ultimately emerged, those who loved him continue to seek the truth.